Build Your Business listeners. This is Matt Reynolds, your host for the podcast, and you are listening to what we are calling the legacy episodes. And really, these are the pre-episodes that really led to this podcast, the Build Your Business podcast. This is really my life's work and my brother's life's work in building your business. And so they were originally published in the Barbell Logic podcast as part of the Principles or Coaching Success series, but really touch on similar topics to the Build Your Business podcast: how to improve your productivity, how to set and accomplish your goals, deprioritize urgent tasks, to focus on what is most important to you, and most importantly, to become a better person and leader and business owner overall. I'm proud to bring you these podcasts. Again, many years of life's work, several years of podcasts, and several decades of business ownership. Hope you enjoy them and learn from them. You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show. You're listening to the Barbell Logic podcast. This is another episode of the Coaching Success series. I am your host, Matt Reynolds. Hope everybody's doing great. Happy Friday, everyone. Just got back from the All In Summit with Andrew and Nikki and Josh, one of our favorite podcasts. We listen to it religiously. Actually, there's a thing that one of the co-hosts said. It's actually been a couple years ago now. Chamath Palihapitiya was being asked about a conflict, and he said during the argument, he said, that's below my line. It's below my line of like things that I will get outraged about. The funny thing about that specific story is that it was actually not a business conflict or a personal conflict, but it was actually a political conflict. And it actually, that line itself caused some outrage, and he had to deal with some drama. But the statement is still true, right? As you grow in business, it is imperative that more and more of the things in life that could stir you up and make you outraged should fall below your line. It should not be able to affect you that way. And so I really want to talk about picking your battles. And this is obviously a little bit different for different levels of business, although I'm going to use some actual examples in my own like personal life, private life over the last few months, some things that, I'll be discreet enough. But the key here is that I'm just not going to participate in outrage culture. There are a million things that I could be outraged about. There are lots of really terrible things. The world's gone crazy, right? But it's incredibly rare that I get outraged about a thing. And so I've watched this happen in my life many times, right? In business, in personal life. And so I want to give you some examples of what I'm talking about. And I've told a little bit of this story before I get to the personal examples of, I don't want to get here, let me just be clear, but I've watched these guys that founded or run like $1 trillion companies, right? The Zuckerbergs and, Facebook, Google. As a matter of fact, at All In Summit, like I've listened to Sergey Brin from Google, and I've heard Elon Musk and, all these, Mark Benioff from Salesforce. It was wild to be in the same room with those guys and hear them talk. I don't know what it takes to sort of enrage them. I know that almost all those guys at some point have been called in front of Congress to testify. That seems pretty scary. Getting called in front of Congress has got to be terrifying, no matter who you are, right? And so Bill Gates had to do that years ago when they tried to break up Microsoft and the monopoly. The question is like, what are the things that fall below their line that you're like, wow, this would be a huge deal to me today? And I can remember as I was coming up in business ownership, both at Strong Gym and in the early years of online coaching, for me, when I allowed myself to be outraged about a thing, and I want to be clear, very rare, if ever, that I've yelled at an employee or a staff member. But when I even just take a tone of anger, which I would say there are times I have the right to do, or that you have the right to do as a boss or as a parent, or I'm not talking about yelling. I'm talking about just sort of righteous anger, righteous and mad. it never lands well for me. And ultimately, I have to realize the goal is not to win the argument. The goal is to get the desired outcome. And for me, I've just found that it's my tactic, and it's authentic. So it's not a sales tactic, is to just be empathetic with people. And so I'm going to dive in a little bit on that so you can give you some real examples of what that might look like. So again, I'm not participating in outrage culture. And let me give you some examples. And I'm not talking about like posting on social media. I'm talking about real life interactions, right? So this is a personal, private example, but I have had some conflict with my eldest daughter for the last several months. Actually, Rachel and I, my wife and I both have with her. And she's a wonderful human being, and she's done so many things that are great, and I'm so proud of her. But there's just been this area of conflict that I won't get into the details of that just caused my home to be a place that wasn't peaceful. And for those of you that know me and listened to me long enough, certainly those of you who have ever been to my house, we try to make this place a place of tranquility and peace. And the world's crazy out there, business is crazy, and it's fast moving and all, but like my home has to be a place of peace. And so, we don't blare the TVs, we don't have dogs barking, we're not yelling across the house at each other, whatever, all the things. We don't have a video game system on our main living room TV where it's blaring video game. Like, I'm just not going to do that. And so we play soft music, sound is chill, the house is clean. It's not a place of chaos, it's a place of order. And so that is all continued, but there's been this kind of piece of personal conflict between mostly my daughter and myself. And I think that there are different people that are involved in this conflict that sort of felt stuck between, I think my wife on some level, that while she very much agreed with me and there was definitely some serious conflict between her and our daughter, that she sort of felt stuck between me and my daughter. And so I just got home last night from an 8-day double business trip, one to Salt Lake City and then one to LA. It was just weighing really heavy on me. And so this was a place where I had chosen this battle. I felt like this was an important, and I still think it's an important battle, but I got to the point where I'm just like, the way we're going about this is not working. It hasn't worked for months. And it happened to be, I think it was on Labor Day. My wife and my youngest daughter actually went to school that day. They actually had Labor Day school, so they get a longer Christmas break. And I was home with my oldest daughter, and we just had a conversation, and I called a truce. And rather than planting my flag and her planting her flag and us not budging an ounce, I gave up ground because peace was more important to me than winning the battle, right? We already had a battle. It wasn't about picking it. It was like, okay, I'm fighting in the fight and we don't have a lot of peace and it's kind of consistent. And I just decided to call a truce. I didn't feel like I could go on an 8-day trip being in a place where my relationship with my daughter was not great. Immediately, this sort of ball of stress, this burden of stress came off me. I just wasn't nearly as sick about it. And immediately, the feel and the culture of my home turned back to peace. And I was very grateful that I did it. Now, I want to be clear, I'll give some kind of counter examples or think as the listener is thinking about this, like, did I abdicate my responsibility as a father? No, this wasn't like my daughter wasn't doing black tar heroin. And I was like, I guess I'm just going to let you do black tar heroin. It's nothing like this, right? So it's a difference in opinion about a topic, about a thing or relationship. And I decided, like, you know what? You're 19 years old. You graduated from college. You have a full-time job. I'm going to trust you to make the right decision here. That's what the truce looked like. That's what the conversation looked like. It wasn't, hey, I'm going to let you do what you want. It was, hey, you know where your mom and I stand, and I trust you. I know you well enough to know that you're going to make the right decision. Now, I might not like the tactics or I might not like exactly how you do it, but I know that the right decision is coming. And so rather than continuing to argue and fight over this thing, I want to call a truce. I want peace. I love you. I care about you. And that's more important to me. And so that was the thing that happened. So I chose this thing that had been like eating at me, keeping me up at night, just tearing my stomach up. I chose peace. And so that was a place where I picked my battle, right? And I've had to do that in other times in personal life. So obviously it works more than just personal life. In business, as the business grows, there's conflict in business all the time. I hesitate to use the word drama, but that's kind of what it is. And as a CEO, you're kind of putting out fires all the time. There are these little battles that are always going on. There's political battles, there's people battles, and there's financial battles, and there's all these things that are constantly going on. And the things that used to just absolutely just wreck me, outrage is maybe not the right word, but just like I just was so stressed out about it. Like things that, issues with an invoice that was wrong or something, or payroll mistake, or a missed deadline or a target, or someone showing up late to a meeting. All of those things can become big things if they're not redirected or coached up. But that's not the same thing as a formal or public admonishment of a staff member. You're not putting them on a performance improvement plan because they showed up late to one meeting, right? And there were things like this that mistakes would be made in the business in the early years. And I would get really frustrated about it. And then you realize that it's going to be okay. Like it really comes back to that, really what is important versus what is not important. In the grand scheme of things, a week from now, 2 weeks from now, a year from now, will I remember this thing? Will it even matter? Will it matter tomorrow? If the answer is no, then it has to be below the line. So you pick your battles. And so that doesn't mean that you don't redirect, but the way that you handle that, rather than public admonishment of somebody, like literally publicly picking a battle, versus some really kind and empathetic private coaching to just kind of redirect the behavior, that's picking your battles, right? Even when there are times you can look at a situation in the business and you go like, this person was absolutely 100% at fault in this situation. I own the business. I'm the CEO. The buck stops here. I'll take responsibility for this. It's looking and figuring out like where you can take the onus or the ownership for whatever conflict occurred or mistake occurred. I mean, that's really the case as a business owner. So I choose not to let these things deeply affect me. And you can do the same thing. This is a choice, right? You can make the choice not to fight it at all, literally at all, or to occasionally just take it on the chin, which it'll be okay, right? And the piece about that is that there are going to be conflicts that have to be dealt with. Like there are going to occasionally be lawsuits. There are going to be staff members that you have to put on the performance improvement plan or fire or whatever. If you pick your battles well, rather than feeling like all you do is put out fires that stress you out. And let me be clear, as the business grows, that's still all you do is put out fires. They just don't stress you out anymore. You can save that stress for the conflict that really matters. And hopefully that's rare, right? And so the last piece of this is that I think it is imperative, and I know I'm going to have some pushback here, it is to assume the best in people. To assume the best in people. And some of you are going to hear that and you're going to push back because you've been screwed over enough times that you become jaded and trust no one. I don't want to be that guy. You know some of my story. I've certainly been screwed over a few times. But I don't want to live my life constantly with no trust, like looking over my shoulder, who's trying to, screw me now. Like that's. So we assume the best in people. So had some conflict over the last couple of weeks with someone who I love and trust tremendously in the business and worked with for years. And there was a disagreement or a piece of conflict. And rather than jump to conclusions in my mind about the motivation behind the conflict of the other person, like what is their motivation? Is it selfish? Are they trying to whatever the thing is? I won't give details. But rather than doing that, I go, I've worked with this person for years and we're on the same team and we're on the same mission. And this isn't a conflict about the team or the mission. So I'm going to assume that they are doing this for the right reason in their heart and in their head. And so I'm going to have a conversation. There was a conflict. And this happens all the time, both as a dad, as a business owner, and as a leader in my church. I've told my daughter before, I've joked with her, said, you just handed me just this like flaming bag of poop. Now I have to deal with it. And so you can walk around and be angry and sling poop everywhere, or you can walk it over to the toilet and flush it or put it in a trash can or bury it under the ground or whatever, or like let it finish burning and throw it in the field. And so for me, it's like there are times when conflict gets handed to you and you're like, okay, now I have to deal with this conflict. Now, the way I deal with the conflict is a choice that I can make. I can assume the best in somebody. And I can say like, okay, this person has exhibited fantastic behavior and action for the last several years. And I've never heard them ever be selfish or motivated by a thing that I felt was morally wrong. And so why would that start today? It probably doesn't. So we did a phone call and I just made sure, try to get to the root of the problem. And once we did, in fact, it was exactly as I expected. This person they had a disagreement. And the reason for the disagreement was some lack of communication and clarity on our part and just some pushback. But it was not at all selfishly motivated or against the company or anything like that. So okay. Well, this conflict, this disagreement is a symptom of the deeper root problem, which was this thing. And that we can work together on. We can find a common ground, and that's what you do. And so, but those things, they can be incredibly stressful, right? And so, again, this person I'm very close to at the business, and the thing with my daughter, same thing, about as close as it gets. I try to save my battles for that sort of thing, for the stuff that really matters. If somebody makes a mistake, and which happens all the time. I mean, mistakes all the time. It's that do unto others, right? When I make a mistake, I hope that people see that with some empathy and sympathy or whatever, and understand that that mistake is very rarely, if ever, made because of some sort of selfish motivation, but it was rather just a mistake because we're humans and we make mistakes. And so if you assume the best in others when they make a mistake or when there's conflict or a disagreement, it's not always a mistake. Sometimes it's just a different way of looking at a thing. Then you immediately can help tear down the walls for everyone, for yourself, for the other that you're in conflict with. It goes back to that crucial conversations. And so as you think about your life, here's the takeaway. Think about your life today, right now. Are you somebody that, even as a business owner, not just putting out fires, which happens, but are you somebody who's kind of constantly surrounded by a ball of drama? If you are, then you're the common denominator. You're surrounded by a ball of drama all the time. And so you shouldn't be, right? And there are times when, yes, things come in threes, 3 or 4 problems all in a row that all have to be dealt with. But ultimately start thinking about, do I need to choose a battle here? Do I need to plant my flag for all of these little things? This is the problem with the micromanager. When somebody micromanages, it's just constant picking battles. They're trying to tell everybody how to do their job. I'm not doing that, right? I'm going to trust good people to do good work. It's my job to hire the right people and then let them do their thing, right? Obviously, we have systems and standard operating procedures in place. Of course, those things are there. That helps make sure that we have high action output or high output actions in the business, especially since we're an online business and we can't just watch someone show up to work and walk down the hall and see if they're working in their office. And I don't want to do that anyway. So I don't have to micromanage. I can just hire good people, let them do their thing, assuming the best in people, choosing my battles, picking my battles, whether that's in the business, whether that's in my family, whether that's in my church, whatever relationships I have in life. Choose your battles, right? That's one of the major tactics of how to live a joyful life rather than a life that is just black-pilled. You don't want a black pill. You don't want to go down that list. You don't want to get to the point where you just think everything is just awful and everything's burning to the ground. I don't want to live that way. By the way, even if it were true, that's one of those places where I kind of want to not have the knowledge of the thing. I kind of want to have the blinders on because I don't want to live my life that way. So choose your battles, right? In work, in life, in family, in relationships, choose your battles and watch things go much, much smoother for you. That doesn't mean you don't still put out the fire. You won't still have the conflict. But when you do it quickly and you can do it with empathy and you can take it on the chin occasionally when you need to and think about what the desired result is. It's not to win. I don't need to win any arguments. I don't care. Matt from 15 years ago did in marriage, in parenting, in business. I had to win arguments. I couldn't care less about ever winning another argument again for the rest of my life. It's not about winning. It's about resolution. We're trying to resolve stuff. Now, that doesn't mean you let people walk all over you. You don't. But if resolution is the goal, then figure out how to get there without stressing yourself out. If there's a way to find resolution without the stress, find resolution without the stress, right? All right, it's another episode of the Coaching Success Series. You guys have a great Friday, great weekend. This weekend, I'm so excited to be back home, sleep in my own bed, be around my family. Super excited. So I hope you guys have a great weekend. We'll see you guys next Friday.